everyone, it's Meg, and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys some of my favourite adult contemporary novels. I have been getting more into adult fiction over the past year, and I have accumulated a couple of books that I have really enjoyed, so I thought I would share them with you guys today. I guess this is also going to be a recommendations for if you mainly read YA but you want to get into adult. I feel like all of these books are very suitable for YA readers if you are doing that transition from YA into adult. I feel like you will definitely be able to read these books and maybe find them relatable in some way or appreciate them, because sometimes going into the adult literature world is very intimidating. I still very much feel that at any rate. So yes, I have 7 books to talk to you guys about today, so without further ado, let's get into the video. First up, we have obviously one of my favourite books of all time, and that is Eleanor is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Obviously, if you have been on my channel for a while, you know that this is one of my favourite books of all time. It was my favourite book of last year, and this is a wonderful story. Well, I wouldn't say it's wonderful for the fact that it's actually quite dark, but it's a really good story about a woman who is called Eleanor, and she lives a very mundane life. She has had the same job for the past 10 years. She doesn't have any friends, she isn't very liked in her workplace, and she is very isolated and very lonely, and that is all you need to know about this book going into it. This is a book that deals with the topic of loneliness. That is the main topic of this book, and I love how well it is done, and it also deals with mental health, specifically depression and suicidal thoughts, so just be aware of that before going into this book. But this is just such a wonderful book. I love the story. It's a very engaging story. You really are hooked from the beginning. You fall in love with Eleanor. She's very imperfect and maybe not the most likeable character at first, but you really get to know her and love for and care for her, especially when you kind of learn more about her and about her past. And I just love how the topic of loneliness and also mental health is dealt with in this book, and how you see Eleanor grow as a person, as a human being, experience things she has never experienced before. And again, it's just a really wonderful, hard-hitting book that is also a very important read, and I feel like there is a lot of discussion that can be held around this book. But it's just a great novel for whether you are reading YA or you are an adult. I just think it's just a wonderful book all round that, well, maybe not really young people can read it, but like if you were like mid-teens above, you will really enjoy it. So this is one of the top on my list, I think, so 100% recommend this read if you've not picked it up already. Next up, we have another book that should be no surprise that is on this list, and that is A Year and Marvellous Ways by Sarah Winman. Obviously, again, if you have been here for a while, you know that Sarah is one of my favourite authors. I have read all of her books now, and A Year and Marvellous Ways is definitely my favourite. This follows the story of an old woman named Marvellous Ways who lives in a gypsy caravan by the sea, and she is very self-sufficient. She grows her own vegetables, she catches her own fish, she bathes in the sea, and she lives a very, I wouldn't say lonely life, but it's a very solitude life that she lives on her own in nature. And it is basically a book about her life and about her stories, and it's also about a guy named Francis Drake who finishes fighting in the war and one day ends up being washed up on the beach where Marvellous lives, and she takes him in and cares for him, and that is all you need to know about this book. If you love books that have beautiful writing like The Astonishing Colour of After or Ava Lavender, nearly forgot the name of it then, I feel like you will you will love the writing style of this book or any of Sarah's books. She has just the most beautiful writing and she creates the most wonderful characters, and it's just a book you fall in love with. You learn to fall in love with Marvellous and hearing about her stories from her past, from her youth, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful book. It's so beautifully written and there's so many beautiful prose, and I should probably reread this soon. I haven't read it in a couple of years, but I highly recommend this, and also When God Was a Rabbit, but I feel like I enjoyed this more because this was the first book of hers that I read, so I enjoyed this more. But again, any of Sarah's books I 100% recommend, especially if you are into beautiful writing, because that is obviously the thing that stuck out the most for me. Next up, we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I feel like if you are watching this video, you will know what this book is about. But in case you don't, it is a book about a film star called Evelyn Hugo, who was a star in Hollywood in the 1950s and 60s, and basically she hires a journalist to interview her and write her life story. And this book is obviously so hyped on BookTube, and I'm sure quite a few of you have read it, and you've also read Daisy Jones and the Six, which I did enjoy, but I don't enjoy it as much as Evelyn Hugo personally. But there's so much more about this book than people say. Like, I feel like you have to experience this book for yourself to appreciate how truly wonderful it is, and the story, and there's so much than what meets the eye with this book, which I really love about it. And like I said, I feel like this is definitely a book that you could if you are transitioning to adult fiction, because obviously it's a very engaging story. I listened to the audiobook and really enjoyed it. There were about 2 or 3 narrators, which I really enjoyed about that, having multiple speakers. I really enjoyed this read, and even though it's very popular, I'm including it on this list anyway, because if you haven't read it, you should totally go and do it, because it is 100% worth it. Next up, we have True Love at the Lonely Hearts Bookshop by Annie Darling. This is a book that I picked up on a whim from a charity shop last year, and I absolutely fell in love with this story. This is basically a story about a woman called Verity, who is in her late 20s, and she works in a bookshop with her friends, and she lives above the bookshop. She has a very needy cat, and she has an imaginary boyfriend called Peter Hardy, who is an oceanographer, just to get her friends off her back about the factor of dating so they don't set her up. And one day she runs into this guy, and there is some miscommunication or some mix-up, and they end up fake dating. And I keep saying to myself that I don't like fake dating, but every book that I've read about fake dating I've really enjoyed. And this is a wonderful book. It is so funny, and I could relate to Verity a lot in this book. She is an introvert, and that's quite a big part of the story actually, about her being able to recharge and need her alone time. And I really related to that. Sometimes it might have been a tiny bit over the top, but it's just something that I could generally really relate to. And I love the characters, I love Johnny, he is awesome, and just there's so many wonderful things about this book. It's just such a cute, fun read, and obviously it deals with a bookshop, which is awesome. And again, if you are wanting to read more adults, I just think this is a really fun book that you will enjoy. If you are in your 20s, you might be able to maybe relate to this a bit more, I don't know, but for me, the main factor was obviously being able to relate to Verity being an introvert. And I just really enjoyed this book. It's so funny and heartwarming and fun, and I 100% recommend if you're looking for a really cute, fun and just wonderful read. Next up we have One Day in December by Josie Silver. This is a book that I read around Christmas time last year, and obviously you think it's Christmassy because One Day in December, because the book starts off with our main character called Laurie, nearly forgot her name then, and she is on the way home from work, and her bus stops and she sees this guy who she doesn't know yet, and they make eye contact and she believes it is love at first sight, and they don't see each other again. And then a year later her flatmate introduces this mystery guy who's called Jack to Laurie as her boyfriend, and the story just goes off from there. Obviously this book is set at Christmas, like the beginning of the book is set at Christmas, but the majority of the book happens throughout all seasons, about the entirety of the year, so you can definitely read this book at any time of the year, not just at Christmas. And this is a book that happens over a 10-year span, so it's like Love Rosie, or I know there's a couple of other books that are similar to that. And this book, I thought it was going to be really cute and fun, but it's actually a lot deeper than you think it is. and I didn't realise how much I was actually going to be able to relate to this book, specifically Laurie, as obviously the main focus of this book is about this romance between her and Jack and will they ever be together. But this book starts off when Laurie is 21 and it finishes when they're around 29-30, and a lot of Laurie's worries and that you hear about in the book are to do with her career, as she wants to be a magazine journalist, and you get to know a lot about her struggles and how she is trying to find her way in terms of career and get to where she wants to be, and the difficulties and struggles and doubts that she has with that, which is what I mainly took away from this book. And that was something that I was not expecting going into it. So if you are in your 20s specifically, maybe this is a book that you will be able to relate to in terms of that. But obviously the romance is still really cute and wonderful, and it's just a book that's just very enjoyable no matter the time of year. I love seeing the characters grow and mature as they get older, seeing them advance in their careers and their relationships as well, and just their lives in general. It's like watching them grow up. And you kind of are watching them grow up, I guess, but it's just a really wonderful read that, like I said, you can read at any time of year, and again, one that I definitely recommend, especially if you are in your 20s. Next up, we have Where the Light Gets In by Lucy Dillon. This book is probably one of my lesser favourite books. I did really enjoy it. This is basically about a woman named Lorna who moves back to her hometown, and she sets up an art gallery, and that is like the very, very basics of this book. But one day she meets this woman called Joyce, I think, who used to be a famous artist in the area, and that's all you need to know going into this book. It's a very vague concept, I know, but I really enjoyed this book. It's a very emotional book. It deals with grief. That's one of the main topics that this book covers, and I really like how it is handled. And I feel like, I wouldn't say this is magical realism, but there is like a sense of magic throughout this book. Like, you feel it, especially kind of towards the end. There's definitely something there, which I feel like obviously if you want to read more young adult, you might like this book if you have read The Astonishing Colour of After by Emily X. Pan, for the fact that it deals with similar topics such as grief, and kind of it's got a magical vibe to it, and also the factor of art, because art is obviously a big theme in this book, and it is a theme in The Astonishing Colour of After because our main character also is an artist. So I feel like you would like these books. I didn't really relate to the character in the sense of her age, because Lorna is 30, I think, in this book, and I didn't really relate to her in that sense because obviously I'm not 30 yet. But I related to her in the aspect of wanting to be... She's not a creator. She says in the book how she's not a creator, but she wants to, you know, share art with the world. And I do relate to her in that sense. And Joyce is probably my favourite character in this book. She's wonderful, and also there is a sausage dog in this book. So, like, what is not to love? But again, a book that I really enjoyed, even though I wasn't super keen on the romance. It just got a bit tedious, but like, that's not like the super main part of this book. But I love this book. I love the friendships, I love the characters, I love the story, and again, if you are into sort of magical-esque books that deal with grief, I feel like you would really enjoy this. And lastly is a book that I don't think is YA. I believe it is young adult. Like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm including it in this video anyway. And that is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Schaffer and Annie Barrows. This is another book that I read last year and absolutely fell in love with. This is a story about a girl named Juliet, and she is a writer and a journalist. And one day she receives a letter from a man who lives on Guernsey, and they basically start up a friendship, and the story goes off from there. And this is set post World War II, and I am not really into historical fiction, especially ones that have dealt around the wars. But this book that's one of the main subjects about this book. It's about Juliet learning about the stories of the people who lived on Guernsey during the Nazi occupation. And I enjoyed this book, like that aspect of the book, a lot more than I thought I would. It is a book that you get attached to so straight away. Juliet is such a wonderful character. You get to learn about all these other characters who lived on Guernsey. You get to hear about their stories. It's a book about stories, about people's stories, and you fall in love with everybody. It's so wonderful, and it's also written in letter form, which I really enjoyed as well. Kind of the letters that Juliet receives from the people who live in Guernsey, and also the letters that they receive from her. And it's just absolutely wonderful. It's one of those books that, even though some of the stories from these people who lived in Guernsey during the occupation are very sad and hard-hitting and really heartbreaking at times, it's just such a warm book. Like, you feel so welcome every time you read it, and it's just wonderful in every single way. I fell in love with it instantly, and it is now one of my favourite books full time. So if you have not read this book, or if you've heard of it and not picked it up, 100% recommend. And again, if you want to read more adult, I feel like this is just a wonderful story, because it's a story about stories, and obviously because of the format as well. It's just a wonderful story, no matter your reading tastes or whether you read adult and young adult. It is just so wonderful, and again, another one that I highly recommend. So that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about these books. Maybe you have found a new adult contemporary novel that you would like to read, or maybe if you are wanting to venture more into the adult fiction worlds, then you might pick up a book from here that you will end up really enjoying, and maybe leads on to reading more of those authors' books, or maybe pick up another one of these afterwards. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books and your thoughts on them, or what are some of your favourite adult contemporary fiction novels. I would love to know, as always. If you like this video, then please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more bookish videos from me, then make sure you hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you'll be noted every time I post a new video. As always, I will leave links to my social media along with the links to my Goodreads in the description down below for you guys. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!